Good afternoon, everyone. Never thought I'd be coming back so soon. Welcome to a very special episode of Nick Files. I just want to first say I'm not officially back just yet. I'm still technically on hiatus, but I am back for a very special occasion for February 22nd, which is a very important day, especially for our veterans and military, which is known as Project Diehard. And me, along with several other shows, have agreed and are participating in this project to give our support for all of our veterans and all those who have been affected by what they've lived through, especially when they served in the military and whatnot, and very much a lot of the mental issues, I guess, for lack of a better term, that affects them after they come home from after serving there for a number of years. So, as you know, many of these shows have been participating throughout the course of the day. That's again that's one of the reasons why I am back temporarily. My show will not be officially be back until sometime in late March or early April, but this is quite an exceptional show, and because of that too, we're actually going to take things a little bit differently this time compared to what I've done to show my participation with this special event that's going on again for our veterans and also our allied veterans too. Is my slideshow that I put together is kind of a combination of two different things. But at the beginning and the end, we're obviously going to give I'm going to give my share of what I've learned about, again, when it comes to the mental effects that a lot of these soldiers, these veterans have had, like I said, when they've been serving. And also, we're also going to kind of look at, which I also got some additional assistance to put this slideshow together. I certainly would like to give part of that credit. I know she said she doesn't need it, but I'll still say it anyway. I like to give part of this credit to Jan Lynn, who actually assisted me by getting some of this information for me, which I definitely would like to thank her for, because without her, I probably would have I would have probably been able to get as much information as I got. But honestly, even with the information that I did, and also my mom helped me out too. So thank you very much for that as well. Um, Before we get started, I just want to also say too that in spite of the information that I was able to collect from my mom, Jan, as well as finding some stuff myself, even the information that I found was relatively limited. So I tried my absolute best to try to add as much info as well as many pictures to kind of add to the slideshow. So I do apologize in advance if I didn't really add anything in beforehand, but I did add a few snapshots of certain things that I thought were important. So it's still going to follow on the lines of how I usually do my slideshows. It's just going to be obviously much different. And again, I just only had so much time to gather a lot of this information. Well, excuse me, a lot of the information and pictures to add to the slideshow. So hopefully you guys will find this very fascinating. I really hope so, because I really worked hard throughout a good portion of the night last night and this earlier this morning to put this together. And also for anybody who's watching, just so you guys know, this current show is currently being pre-broadcasted. So anybody that does comment later when this does eventually get broadcasted onto Things Network, Pack Channel, among the other networks I'm a part of, I will not be able to respond to it because, obviously, like I said, it's pre-recorded. So don't think that I'm ignoring comments. I'm doing this now, and this will be broadcasted later. So just want to make things clear on that. But without further ado, let's get started. And hopefully, with the amount of information I got, this should last for at least a good 45 minutes to an hour. So let's get started. Here we go. All right, now let me go through this whole thing. I have to start doing this all over again to make sure that it's being shown. I hope so. Okay, so I just want to make sure this is working correctly, because since I'm not doing this since I'm pre-broadcasting it, I can't see it from my phone, obviously. So see. Yep. Okay, we're good. It's showing. Right now, how do we get back? In spite of what I'm going to present, I obviously still kept the title to still kind of keep the originality of how I usually do things with these slideshows. But like I said, this is what I'm going to be calling the Project Diehard 2024 global support for our veterans. And like I said, it's not only just focused for our American veterans. It's also for a lot of our allied forces veterans. I mean, allied forces veterans who've served, especially those who have been involved in NATO, especially those in NATO, but even those outside of NATO, we give that support. And Jan actually gave me kind of a good idea. Obviously, don't take it the wrong way, but this even goes for veterans that even if they're they were in the countries of where I guess you can say our enemies are, regardless of the fact, uh, what no matter which side you're, whether you're on the good side or bad side, whichever side you're on, it's all the same for surviving veterans. So a lot of times it it affects both sides very greatly, because, and I think it really and I think that's pretty factual, I guess, for lack of a better term, where you have, soldiers out there who they come home and they come home and they end up, having all these, after what they've witnessed, while they were fighting, they witnessed a lot of the horrors of war, and seeing a lot of their fellow comrades, die right in front of them when they're just, simply, fighting for the country, and they're looking for some kind of closure, if that makes any sense, if you will. So either way, this is obviously a global support for, again, all veterans regardless. And I guess from this point on, like I said, I'll talk a little bit about that first, and then kind of give a little history of, in this case, how some of our allied forces kind of came together for certain events. Most of it that I was most of what I found actually was mainly focused on the early 2000s, especially the combined forces that occurred, that collaborated in Iraq in the early 2000s. So I did have it sent to somebody else to get their review on. They said it was very comprehensive. So I'm hoping that this is going to be just as comprehensive for you guys. I don't know why the title, or hold on one second here. I don't know why the title's not showing up. Let's fix that up very quickly. So bear with me for just a second here. There we go. Okay. So, all right, we're good. Now let me go through this whole thing again. Share this whole thing once again. Bear with me for another minute. And okay. Oh, yeah, I just want to make sure the screen. Okay, yeah, screen share is working. All righty. So when you think of, so obviously when it comes to, again, certain things for veterans, who have, had gone through a hell of a lot, while they were serving, in the military or the Marines or the Army, there's always a good likely chance for maybe not exactly everybody, but for a lot of them to have a lot of mental health issues, even possibly homelessness, and believe it or not, even suicide. But the greatest difference among the countries is probably the delivery of mental health programs and services, as they must be coordinated with the healthcare system in each country. To give a couple examples, Canada's federal, sorry, just got a message. Canada's federal system poses challenges that do not exist in New Zealand, and the lack of a universal healthcare system in the United States requires a parallel system of health institutions that Canada no longer needs. These considerations, therefore, have a significant influence on how each country develops its own solutions to mental health problems that may arise from military service. In New Zealand, for example, since there is no separate department for veterans, the programs for them are the same as those for serving and transitioning personnel. The smaller number of cases, given the smaller number of personnel, makes it easier for New Zealand to offer individual service. In the United Kingdom, another good example, the services of the armed forces are available to serving and transitioning personnel up to 6 months after release. After that, the National Health Service is responsible for veterans' health care needs. Special needs are met by community organizations, after which the Departments of Defense works through Veterans UK, the central umbrella organization that coordinates service delivery at the local level. For example, in the case of community health services for veterans, the largest partner organization in England is what's known as Combat Stress. In Scotland, Veterans First Point coordinates these services, while another organization coordinates services in Wales. But the thing is, what is important is that, unlike in Canada, the governments of these two countries only coordinate specialized community services. They do not directly provide mental health programs to their veterans. During the study, some discussions on mental health led to a discussion about the connection between mental health problems and homelessness. Now, in the United States, it's no surprise at all whatsoever. Uh, Homelessness is clearly a problem, and not just for veterans. I mean, that it goes for a lot of people, unfortunately. I mean, even here in Chicago, we have, I don't know if I would say that we have one of the highest rates. I wouldn't say that necessarily, but we do have a lot of, unemployed and homeless people, still living out in the streets. But either way, however, the large number of veterans in the US means many among the homeless population, definitely. It is therefore easy to assume a cause and effect relationship between a veteran and homelessness. However, this link has not been clearly established. Similarly, data from the United Kingdom do not suggest any direct link between the two. As Captain Heffron points out, there has been a study undertaken in the last few years, only available for London, where we see as few as 3% of all those who are homeless in the London area being ex-armed forces. And indeed, they may come from armed forces of different nations. Excuse me. Now, surprisingly, neither Germany nor France seem to have any specific problem with homeless veterans either. Mr. Charlotte of the Office National des Veterans et des Victimes de Gouvernance. See, I'm not good with other languages, unfortunately. So I'm sorry. I probably was butchering that whole thing. In France, nothing compares to what the U.S. and Canada have experienced with respect to the homeless. The regional network I mentioned earlier helps individuals in distress to find a local support service. Let me add one thing. It is important to realize that these regional services, these local services, work closely with other government services, particularly the prefects. I'm not sure whether the Canadian system is similar to the French system, but the ONA CVG works extensively with the prefects who have specific responsibility in the area of housing. In France, prefects have quotas for housing that they can assign. Since we all work well with the prefects, we may very well turn to them to try to find housing when a veteran is homeless and in distress. Okay, so now we're going to switch things up. I'm actually going to fix this very quickly. Hold on one second here, because that also was supposed to fade in. See, again, I was working on this, not necessarily so quick, but I was working on it to a point where, as we were getting closer to today, I only had so much time to really do this. So, what we're going to discuss next, we're going to just not necessarily, but kind of almost take a break from that, because, like I said, there was only so much that I was able to find to add for this slideshow. So, excuse me. We're gonna go into a little bit of a history subject now, which I wish, honestly, if there was more websites that had a lot more, I probably would have had this a little bit more connected, if you will. So I do, again, apologize if I'm just jumping from one subject to another, because there was only so much information I could find about what I was able to find. So either way, it should be interesting. So now what we're going to get into is, like I said, is a little bit of a history lesson. Okay, now, there we go. Now we got the fading correct. Is basically now basically the Allied forces coming together on one of these operations during the time of Operation Iraqi Freedom. So just to kind of give that kind of support system of different countries, given assisting the U.S. forces in this case, if I'm saying that correctly. Excuse me. So From the start of Operation Iraqi Freedom in March 2003 until March 2009, ground troops from 37 countries deployed alongside U.S. forces, with some 20 other countries providing indirect support. Yet, U.S. media and public opinion often regarded this coalition of the willing with either skepticism or disdain, believing that the United States was engaged in a lonely and, by implication, hopeless cause, which I can understand with what they were thinking first, because especially, you know, I mean, honestly, the only what I could really think of is especially after 9/11 in this case. I'm sure the United States basically thought that this was something that, they were going to have, I guess really say that they were going to have to kind of deal with this themselves. But either way, it was still incredible that many other countries decided to deploy their forces during the start of Operation Iraqi Freedom. On the contrary, many countries provided significant military support to the U.S. Army, performing vital missions to assist combat, intelligence, reconstruction, and support operations. The participation of these coalition partners proved critical to the success of the overall mission. This monograph examines the achievements and contributions. The terms allies, coalition forces, coalition partners, and multinational forces are used interchangeably to refer to non-U.S. forces that deployed to Iraq under U.S. theater or regional command. And by the way, I almost forgot to mention a lot of this information I was able to find. Speaking of which, and again, this was with the assistance of Jan, was we actually went through a PDF file of a book that had a lot of this. So a lot of this came from the book that we looked at this information from. But again, there just wasn't that many sites that could provide a lot of this info I was looking for. So we didn't take exactly all of it, but we took what we believe was probably the most important pieces of information to have for this slideshow. Now, these do not include, now going back to these different terms, these do not include forces deployed to Iraq under the, I don't even know how to say that word, of the United Nations, UN, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that are known as NATO, whose troops were not officially part of the U.S. command and control structure. Although the official number is unknown, it's about 60 nations. In addition to the contributions coalition forces made to the operational and tactical environment in Iraq, their presence had obvious strategic implications that reached far beyond the theater of operations. Multinational operations strengthened and maintained long-standing alliances and reflected a general aura of international cooperation among U.S. allies. They also warded off charges of neo-colonialism against the enterprise and imparted a genuine feeling of legitimacy to its aims. Japan's participation in Iraq, its first military deployment since World War II, which is just incredible that, after that long, significantly reinforced its long existing strategic ties with the United States. A similar bond resulted from El Salvador's comparatively large and lengthy involvement in the war. In addition, partnerships forged in coalition operations helped foster new alliances and friendships, which, it's just amazing that especially after certain, if you look in the case with Japan and also El Salvador, after all the, as it says, the strategic ties and rivalries and stuff like that, it's just amazing that they tried to, I guess, bandage up, for lack of a better term, to try to not only increase what, not only just to give the assistance, I guess, but to also just increase that coalition or alliance for all those that, want to help out, in this case of the U.S. or other countries, regardless. Now, Georgia's decision to send troops to Iraq for example, created strong ties with the United States and other Western allies, as did the significant contributions of other Eastern European and former communist bloc nations. Finally, multinational operations helped improve interoperability between U.S. and coalition forces, which will be essential in future combined operations. The U.S. Central Command and U.S. Army planners. Oh, wait a minute. I guess that was, I might have missed a sentence there. Okay. Now, by March of 2003, the term coalition of the willing had entered common usage to refer to those countries that supported Operation Iraqi Freedom and the U.S. presence in post invasion Iraq. The initial publicly released detailing coalition participants in March contained 49 nations. In the later part of that year, the White House revised this original list, decreasing the number to 48 at the request of Costa Rica. Costa Rica's request reflected significant international opposition to military action against Iraq and foreshadowed how difficult it would be to keep such a large and diffused group together. All multinational armed forces that participated in the invasion of Iraq were under the command and control of the commander of CENTCOM, or if it's CENTO, I think it's CENTCOM. Okay, yeah, CENTCOM, General Tommy R. Franks. Although national chains of command remained strong, CENTCOM, a U.S. regional combatant command established in 1983, had planished an operational control of U.S. operations in the Persian Gulf from Egypt to Pakistan. It was a U.S. joint command consisting of land, sea, air, and special operations forces. Each of these components was under the combined forces led by General Franks. American and other allied nations' ground forces in CENTCOM served as part of the coalition. Forces Land Component Command, CFLCC, headed by Lieutenant General David D. McKernan. CFLCC consisted of two U.S. Corps level headquarters, the U.S. Army V Corps and the I Marine Expeditionary Force. Allied forces, specifically the British 1st Armored Division, served directly under the I think it's supposed to be the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force during the ensuing operations. Meanwhile, Special Operations Forces of the United Kingdom, Australia, and Denmark, according to most reports, became part of the U.S. Combined Forces Special Operations Component Command, or better known as the CFSOCC, another subordinate headquarters of CENTCOM. And this is actually, okay, so right here, this is actually the first chart that I was able to find, the Coalition Forces Land Component Command and U.S. Combined Forces Special Operations Command as of May of 2003. It's still, from what I heard, I mean, if I'm saying this correctly, it still kind of looks the same, but you're going to notice some changes, though, as we press on. So obviously you got the second Secretary of Defense up here, U.S. Central Command down here, Coalition Forces Special Operations Component, which was led by the United States, and the Coalition Forces Land Component Command, which also was led by the United States. Most of these here, as you can see, were led here by the U.S., except for the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force West. Yes, it was still led by U.S., but it looked like the secondary was also Australia and the U.K., and the 1st Armored Division was led by the United Kingdom also. So that's quite interesting of how it really, they made this whole chain of command, if you will. Oh, now this right here. Shortly after the initial invasion, Spanish soldiers moved into southern Iraq from positions in Kuwait, if I'm saying that correctly. Although they later served in a combat role alongside British and Australian forces, their first task was primarily humanitarian assistance behind the Allied lines of advance. A number of other nations sent troops to Iraq during this phase: Albania, the Czech Republic, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Republic of Korea, Ukraine, and Mongolia all deployed soldiers to Iraq from late March through April. By April 30th, a total of 11 Allied partners had committed nearly 50,000 troops to the coalition effort. To perform its diverse missions, CGTF 7 also had at least limited operational control of all forces within Iraq, including all multinational forces. Now, after May 1st, 20 countries deployed contingents to Iraq: Azerbaijan, Bulgaria, Estonia, Georgia, Honduras, Hungary, Italy, Kazakh, Kazakhstan. I can never say that one for some reason. Latvia, if I'm saying that correctly, too. Lithuania, Macedonia, Moldova, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Nicaragua, Norway, Philippines, Romania, Slovakia, and Thailand. The influx brought the total number of Allied partners in Iraq to 333 and increased the number of non-U.S. troops in Iraq to 25,000. Key to the second expansion was UN Security Council Resolution 1511, passed on October 16th, which officially authorized the creation of a multinational security force in Iraq and urged UN member states to contribute to the force and the reconstruction of Iraq. More nations sent troops after the UN approved the resolution because it provided international legitimacy to the effort. Allied partners played the major role in several of these multinational divisions. The British, who provided the second largest contingent of forces in Iraq, took the lead in MNDSE and provided command and control for a large number of coalition forces in southeastern Iraq, including those from Italy, Australia, Romania, Denmark, Portugal, Czech Republic, and Lithuania. Poland, the third largest troop contributor, took the land in MNDCS, which included troops from the Ukraine, the so-called Plus Ultra Brigade, MNBPU, also known as the Brigada Hispano-Americana, composed of troops from Spain, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua, as well as forces from Kazakhstan. I can't say that one. Latvia and Mongolia. MNDNE, under the lead of the Republic of Korea, stood up in September 2004 after Seoul agreed. I never really figured out how to pronounce that one. Agreed to significantly increase its troop strength and undertake reconstruction and humanitarian efforts in northern Iraq. Now, that's quite amazing that these other allied forces that were added to this, I mean, it was like it just got bigger and bigger, which really goes to show about this kind of, I guess if you want to call it global support, of assisting again these different countries. It's just absolutely incredible. Now, now right here, this is the second chart that was created as of June 2003. So now, not necessarily, again, I should take back what I said, not necessarily the same, but it does have a little bit of a difference to it. You still have multinational division north, central, and also in Baghdad, all led by the United States, as well as the West, also led by the U.S. And then now this time you got the South Division being led by Poland and Southeast led by the UK. So now they're really starting to kind of take charge of these certain divisions now. In April 2004, CGTF 7 commanded 162,000 ground troops in Iraq, of which approximately 25,000 were coalition soldiers and a Japanese contingent that deployed to Iraq in February of that year. A number of nations, however, withdrew their forces during this time. Nicaraguan forces left Iraq in February due to funding constraints. Then, In the wake of the bombing of the Madrid commuter trains in March by terrorists, Spain withdrew its forces, as did the rest of the Plus Ultra Brigade, except El Salvador. These withdrawals resulted in the number of allied nations with troops in Iraq falling to 30. So, unfortunately, I mean, it's not really surprising that, even when you have all these different allied nations coming together to fight, you know, unfortunately, some of them will eventually withdraw because, again, for a number of various different reasons, as you can see right here. So it's not surprising the least bit at all. In part, as a response to the deteriorating situation on May 15th, less than 11 months after CJTF 7 stood up, CENTCOM replaced it with two new commands: Multinational Force Iraq, MNF, or better known as MNFI, and Multinational Corps Iraq, MNCI. General Sanchez, the CGTF 7 commander, led MNFI until July 1st, when General George W. Casey replaced him, while Lieutenant General Thomas F. Metz took command of MNCI. Now, the term plus ultra, which is Latin for further beyond, is the national motto of Spain, believe it or not, which is something I never even knew about. Now, shortly after standing up, MNFI adjusted the boundaries of the multinational division areas of responsibility. The basic multinational division structure, however, remained relatively unchanged, with MNDN, MNDNC, MNFW, MNDB, MNDCS, and MNDSE. The only significant alteration was the creation of MNDNE under the control of the Republic of Korea from the MNDN area of responsibility. As a result, MNFI truncated MNDN and renamed it Multinational Force Northwest, MNFNW. She's a lot of initials here. In September of 2004, the United Kingdom and Poland continued to provide the lead in MNDSE and MNDCS, respectively. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, a few smaller nations added their units to the mix. Tonga deployed a small contingent to Iraq in June 2004, and Armenia deployed its first forces, 50 personnel, in February 2005. Other nations added or subtracted from their deployed forces so that by May, MNFI maintained command and control over 23,000 non-U.S. coalition soldiers. This was only 2,000 fewer soldiers than before CJTF 7 stood down the previous year. While the number of allied partners in the coalition decreased to 25 by May 2005, many of the remaining allied contingents actually increased in size. Now, in the United States, so we actually are getting close to the end of the slideshow, which again, I know it wasn't very much, but it was definitely a lot more than what I was originally thinking we were going to get. But we are now kind of going back to the mental health issue because again, I want to kind of switch between regards to the mental health and also an example of different allied forces coming together to fight alongside again with the United States. So now we're going to go back as we get close to the end of this. Like I said, I was anticipating this was going to at least last for probably about a good 45 minutes to an hour. And let's see how far we've gotten so far, because I was reading relatively slowly and carefully. So we're only at 35 minutes. I was expecting it was going to go a lot more longer, but I still got at least another 2 or 3 more slides, and it's going to last for quite a while anyway. So I don't think I'm going to be able to make it for a full hour, but I could see it lasting for at least about a good 40. Okay, so I'll put it between another good 40, 45 minutes. And once again, I just want to say for everybody who's tuning in right now, this is actually a pre-record broadcast, so I'm not actually live as of right now. So again, if anybody's wondering why I'm not answer, saying hello or answering any questions or anything like that. Again, this is all pre-recorded, so don't think I'm ignoring you. I promise you guys. So, anyways, to get things as we get close to the end of this, but still have a little bit more to go. In the United States, it is commonly believed that there is a direct causal link between the suicide rate and veterans, given the risks of mental problems. So once again, like I said, going back to the mental issues, of what a lot of these soldiers are affected by after they've been overseas. As Robert Reynolds of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs reported, 22 U.S. veterans, sadly, and honestly, this is something I never even knew, 22 U.S. veterans commit suicide each day. In Canada, believe it or not, the suicide rate among veterans is about 50% higher than among serving members and the general population. It is not clear whether this difference is as significant in the other countries studied. Mr. Borstler strongly objected to this popular belief, which he thinks stigmatizes veterans and makes employers worry that all veterans suffer from mental health problems and will be a danger rather than an asset to the organization. When I educate employers every day, I talk about the misnomer that is post-traumatic stress, about demystifying it and talking about the data. They say that 22 American veterans commit suicide every day. Let's drill down on that data. We don't have to go into the specifics when we talk to the employers because they usually get it right away. But 20 out of those 22 veterans are white males over the age of 60. This is exactly consistent with the civilian population in the United States. Now, it was actually supposed to show up here. I guess I must have accidentally took it out, but it does show, believe it or not, that white males over the age of 60 do tend to commit suicide, unfortunately, at a higher rate than do other populations. Which again, something I know a lot of them often suffer, of course, PTSD, but I never thought that it was mainly for those who were over the age of 60 that actually have these suicidal thoughts. But does make a lot of sense when a lot of years have gone by. In order to prevent further mental health issues from occurring in their transition and reintegration into civilian life, we need to focus more on the employment and career transition instead of putting more dollars and media attention and efforts into explaining why veterans are broken, rather than why we're civic assets and we will be the best employees at your company. This statement offers some food for thought. Just because a veteran committed suicide does not mean he committed suicide because he was a veteran. We must challenge the preconceived suspicion that veterans are less reliable in the workplace because of the potential mental health challenges that have become too often associated with them. All the evidence provided to this committee clearly demonstrates that veterans tend to, in fact, be more reliable in the workplace than other employees. And unfortunately, again, that was pretty much it. So again, I really wish I could. Again, I did hours studying trying to find more stuff like that, and they're just, again, even with additional help, I just couldn't find as much as I was hoping to. So this was really the best I can come up with. I didn't want to go too deep into what I was talking about because, again, I wanted to also make this, again, in part for Project Diehard, make this also about mental illness. For veterans, and it's I'm hoping this was pretty consistent because, again, it's amazing that even when I did the research that there was just such limited websites that really told a lot about it, not just regarding, let's say in this case with the United States and Canada. It's like that I just couldn't find a lot for really a lot of other countries. So it's just, I don't know. It's something really different that I've never really, sorry. Actually just got a message from Jeremy. So I guess I'll answer that right after I get off here. But yeah, it's just, it's just something that it's just kind of strange that, I mean, there are websites like where they can offer, support for veterans, whether it's again here in the United States or, in Canada as well as other countries, but there's not very many websites that really kind of give a lot of description about how a lot of these how effective these veterans are, after they've served overseas or they fought in these wars. It's just I don't know. It's just something relatively unusual, and it's definitely something that I think should definitely be looked upon. To kind of be more studied, I guess, for lack of a better term. And it's a very important thing because we kind of do have to look at things, in this case, from the veterans' point of view, because you can never really understand what they have gone through, especially when they've served again, whether it's military or the Marines or even the Navy, or but more, I guess I'll say more for the like Marines and military. And we've often heard stories time and time again for those who served, who have fought in these wars. They observed the wars and horror, the horror and wars, excuse me. And it must be very, very difficult for them to comprehend. Obviously, as a grandson of two World War II veterans and also a relative of a few veterans who have also served in Vietnam, not necessarily both of my grandfathers, they didn't although they both served in World War II, they didn't actually witness a lot of the fighting itself. But in the case with, I don't know fully, but with some of my distant relatives who have served in Vietnam, I certainly cannot imagine what they gone through. And although I haven't seen most of them for a while, even though they seem to be living a very normal life, I'm sure that deep down inside, that effect is still very, very real for both, for even after all these years. So nonetheless, it sticks to you forever, regardless. It will never go away. Again, that's why we have something that's called PTSD. Well, I wouldn't say that's why, but a lot of these soldiers, indeed, they do suffer PTSD, and later in life, from what now I learned, is that they do often have these thoughts. Some of them do have these thoughts of suicide, apparently over the age of 60, which is again something I just learned for myself in this presentation. So it's I don't know, it's very unfortunate, but that's why I think, by doing something like this will definitely give a lot of support, and help out for these veterans. Again, not just here in the United States, but also for a lot of these other countries, including even, those who have fought currently out, either in, with the war in Ukraine and Russia, or Israel in Israel and Palestine. I mean, those are two primary examples where, years, whenever these do end, it's going to have an effect on a lot of the surviving soldiers that, fought for their respective countries. So the reasons are never good, but the loss of life is certainly out even worse. But for those who survive, again, it will have a lasting effect on them, nonetheless. But anyways, again, I know this wasn't really a very long one, but we did manage to make it almost to the 45-minute mark. So this actually did work out pretty well. I'll message him later. I definitely would like to thank Zach of Pack Channel, of course, all the other shows on the other networks I'm a part of. But I guess in this case for Zach, I definitely would like to thank him for allowing me to take part in this, bring this special Nick Files on for Project Diehard, to give my support and to give my information out. I took part in it last year, if you guys remember. I did the year before. I'm hoping to do it again next year. Of course, now that I got a full year, I'm going to really kind of do some hard thinking on what I'm going to be talking about for next year, because trying to come up with what I wanted to talk part of was a little bit more difficult than I expected it was going to be. So I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about until literally like 2 nights ago. And that's why, again, giving Jan the credit, she had this idea of talking about, different, countries coming together. And again, even if it's countries that, we've never really fought with before, the fact that we grew to quite a large number, that's pretty incredible. It really is. So, but either way, again, I do apologize if I didn't really add like a lot of pictures, or I didn't get as much as I was hoping I was going to get. it was the best that I could do. And I hope either way you guys found it interesting regardless. So I definitely would like, again, I would like to thank Zach. I also would like to thank, again, Jan and my mom for providing the information for me to put this slideshow together. And for anybody that tunes in later today, I'm going to say thank you in advance for checking it out. We really appreciate it. As you guys know, like I said at the beginning, if you weren't here at the beginning of the show, I'm not officially back just yet. Again, I'm still on my hiatus. Again, I was only coming on to help take part in this special event. So I will be back, as a reminder, sometime in late March or early April. I haven't even gotten started on the other presentations yet, but they are currently underway, which I'm hoping to begin sometime in early March. So that's why I'm saying late March, early April is when I'm going to get started again. But either way, I'll begin start with this in just a couple of days, sometime after February. But as always, thank you guys so much for tuning. As always, it's definitely good to be back. I will see you guys in just a couple of weeks, and I'm already coming up with a good list of things I'd like to present. Of course, we're going to continue on with, for starters, the cryptid stories, because I do have a few more cryptids I would like to present before we get back into the haunted and historical locations. So it's going to be great. So I can't wait for season 3. So season 3 coming soon, just another month or so. But again, thank you everybody so much, and I'll see you again real soon. And Zach, thank you once again for letting me take part in this. You guys all have a great night.